The Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, if substantial changes had not been made in the Select Committee to this bill, I would not be standing up here prepared to support it through its second reading and its remaining stages, and nor would the Labor Party. Frankly, Mr Speaker, the process by which this bill has been handled was an absolute travesty. And I say that with due respect to Jamie Lee Ross's comments about the way the Select Committee cooperated. It did cooperate and it did get a better bill out of it. But to bring in a bill and take it from first reading through to the final reading, which will happen this evening, is not good enough, is against the democratic process of this House, is against the right of New Zealanders to be properly consulted on and participate on legislation, and the very worst type of legislation to ram a bill through under those circumstances is a piece of legislation that gives substantial powers to a body that operates in secret because of its very nature. What we should be doing in this House is not only going through legislation comprehensively and thoroughly and maximising the public's right to participate, but we should be building up the public's confidence that the powers that we give to organisations are properly put in place. And when you have 2 days, just 2 days, for the public to prepare and present submissions, that is not the way that a democratic process should operate. Ironically, Mr Speaker, normally we would have advertised this bill across a range of newspapers and it would have been less high profile than it was because of the government's decision to act in a way that got it on TV1 and TV3. And the submissions flooded in. We got just under 600 of them, and we would have had more submissions but for the fact that the web went down under pressure on a couple of occasions. Mr Speaker, I've got to say that there was one thing in common with all the submissions that were made on this bill. Whether it was the lofty New Zealand Law Society with a submission prepared by 10 of our most eminent jurists in the country, or whether it was by the New Zealander that was making his or her first submission ever to a Select Committee, they all said one thing. They said, this process is wrong, it stinks, you can't expect us to respond in 48 hours and do the job that we need to on this legislation. And this legislation should never have gone through in this form. If it were not for the fact that we worked extraordinary hours to hear everybody that was capable of getting to the committee, and if it wasn't for the fact that the government relented on its determination to push through things that were not justified to push through under urgency, we wouldn't be supporting it. I have to say one of the downsides of the way we dealt with it was the way in which the community that feels that it's the most targeted and affected by this legislation was not engaged as thoroughly as it should have been, and that's the Muslim community. David Shearer and I met with the Muslim community early on when this bill was first being talked about, and they expressed their concerns to us about it, and they expressed their concerns to the committee. And their concerns were of a number of different natures. One, they said, we are New Zealanders, we are not Muslims in New Zealand, we are Muslims from New Zealand. This is our country, and why is it that we can't get to talk to the Prime Minister about something that we think will intimately affect the lives of our community, and we can't even get to talk to the Minister for Ethnic Communities? They didn't have time. They didn't have time, sir. Funny, they said to us, when it was about halal killing of export meat, when the markets were closing and the government desperately needed the help of the Federation of Islamic Associations of New Zealand. The ministers were over us like a rash. But when it's about us and the impact that this is having on us, they're not to be seen. And they said, and there were a number that made this point, that because this awful organisation called ISIS or ISIL misuses the name of Islamic, the more the community hears this name Islamic, the Islamic State, they think that somebody that looks differently because they have a beard or they wear a head shawl, they must be terrorists. And what we were getting from the Muslim community were comments that they were being abused in the street And they said it didn't help when the Prime Minister talked about beheadings. And I've got to say to my colleagues in New Zealand first, it doesn't help when your leader, Winston Peters, talks about we shouldn't be bringing these people in from Muslim countries, if I heard it right. I've got an electorate full of people that have come from the Middle East to escape oppression and come here for a better life for their families. They are decent New Zealanders, they are hard-working, they are so grateful for the chance to have a decent and peaceful life in this country. And I've got to tell you, sir, that when there is a problem in the Muslim community because some hothead or idiot talks about doing terrorist acts, they are the first to come down on those individuals and put them in their place. They are the first, if they can't do it themselves, to go to the authorities and report it to the authorities. If we want to know what will protect us most against terrorist acts in this country, it is not just this piece of legislation. It's mainly not this piece of legislation. It's about the fact that we have developed in New Zealand, by and large, a harmonious and an inclusive community. It's about the fact that our Muslim community are decent people and moderate people. And it's about the fact, Mr. Speaker, that New Zealand, through not engaging in the Iraq War in 2003, which was built on a lie, and because we were fiercely independent about nuclear-free New Zealand, that the world sees New Zealand as an independent country and a decent and a fair country. Those are the things that most protect us against terrorism. And if we lose those things, then we're at greater danger. Mr. Speaker, there is a role for security services in New Zealand. There are people in this country who are alienated and who are personality disordered, is the kindest way I could describe them, and that when they get a twisted philosophy such as the ISIS philosophy that tells them that they are online all the time, that they should be out there committing terrorist acts and they will be rewarded with eternity because they do it, that is a risk to New Zealand. I don't want to exaggerate the risk. Our threat level set by the government is low. Low means a terrorist attack is possible but not likely. You know, it's ironic, in Australia across the ditch, it's at a high level. In the United Kingdom, it's at an extreme level. We are at a low level, but it could still happen. And sensible powers given to security intelligence organisations that use those powers within the law and don't abuse the powers is a sensible precaution. I'm aware that the Security Intelligence Service doesn't always use its powers sensibly. I'm a product of a misguided effort by the director of the SIS to engage in a smear campaign through the Prime Minister's office to tell lies about me. But, you know, this isn't about Utu, this is about New Zealand and doing the right thing. And we are doing the right thing in supporting this bill, but I want to say that the safeguards that we put in are critical. The narrowing of the scope that would have given these intrusive powers to the SIS right across the scope of their activities has been brought back narrowly to the point that might possibly justify their legislation. I want to say one final thing to the Attorney-General because it's an important point. I am in favour of stopping people leaving New Zealand that wish to contribute to an organisation that commits crimes against humanity and war crimes. I am not, Minister, in favour of stopping New Zealanders who go to fight for a cause that they believe in, that might be the Kurdish people in my electorate that want to support their family in Kobani against ISIS, or it might be the Syrian families in your electorate or my electorate that want to fight for democracy against the oppressive regime of al-Assad.
Order.
We were assured at the Select Committee that these people would not be affected by this legislation. So I was a little concerned when I heard the Minister on Q&A suggesting otherwise. I would like in the committee stages, sir, an assurance from the Attorney-General that people that go to fight for what is right will not have the freedoms that they are guaranteed under our Bill of Rights taken away from them. Yes, an end to those that are going to fight for terrorist organisations committing crimes against humanity, not an end to people who want to fight for what they believe in to protect their families and do the right thing.